Good morning, and thank you for joining us for today's legislative briefing. Beautiful Friday morning in Oklahoma. I'm Mike Neal, President and CEO of the Tulsa Regional Chamber. If you made it this far, undoubtedly, you're aware that today is our first time using the virtual event platform Remo. I hope you were able to take advantage of the networking time before we got started. After our program ends in about an hour, we'll return to that virtual ballroom so you can continue visiting with colleagues and friends. Just a reminder, there are several floors, so be sure to visit tables on floors 1 and 2. It's no substitute for being together in person, but it feels like one step closer to a sense of normalcy. It's our pleasure to be joined today by leaders of the Oklahoma House and Senate Appropriations Committees, Senator Roger Thompson and Representatives Kevin Wallace and Kyle Hilbert. Our Senior Vice President of Governmental Affairs, Elizabeth Osborne, will lead a discussion with these distinguished legislative leaders. While we're not able to take questions from the audience, many of the legislators in attendance will be available during the virtual networking time after our program concludes. Before we go any further, I'd like to thank the generous sponsors of our legislative briefing breakfast series, including several individuals from those companies that are with us today. Our presenting sponsors are the George Kaiser Family Foundation, One Gas, represented by Curtis Dinan, Senior Vice President and Chief Commercial Officer, a member of our Chamber Board of Directors, Osteopathic Founders Foundation, represented by President and CEO Sherry Wise, and TTCU Federal Credit Union, represented by Dan Newberry, Senior Vice President of Lending. Our gold sponsors are American Bank and Trust Company, represented by President and CEO Fraser Hinkey, Ascension St. John, represented by Chief Advocacy Officer Lucky Lamons, AT&T, represented by Director of External Affairs Mike Cooper, a Chamber Board member, Oklahoma Aggregates Association, represented by Executive Director Deborah Youngblood, the OSU Center for Health Sciences, represented by Dr. Dennis Blankenship, Senior Associate Dean of Academic Affairs and Clinical Professor of Emergency Medicine, and Tulsa Wealth Advisors Raymond James, represented by their Honorable President Mike Mazie. Our legislative benefactors are Cherokee Nation businesses, represented by Principal Chief of the Cherokee Nation, Chuck Hoskin Jr., a member of our Chamber Board of Directors, Community Care, represented by Josiah Sutton, Vice President of Marketing and Business Development, Cox Communications, represented by Vice President and Tulsa Market Leader Roger Ramsire, the Chamber's immediate past chair, the Grand River Dam Authority, represented by Executive Vice President John Weiskiver, Public Service Company of Oklahoma, represented by President and COO Peggy Simmons, the Chamber's Vice Chair of Economic and Workforce Development, Quick Trip, represented by Government Affairs Manager Michael Junk, a member of our Chamber Board, and Tulsa Tech, represented by Tony Heberlin, Chief Communications and Economic Development Officer. Even though we don't have physical tables for today's event, you'll see our corporate table sponsors recognized throughout the virtual ballroom. Please be sure to take note of these companies for your future business needs and stop by their table after our program concludes and say hello. I'll now pass it over to my distinguished colleague, Elizabeth Osborne, and our star legislative panelists. Elizabeth?
Thank you, Mike. Well, good morning. It's so good to see everyone today. We're honored to be joined by several leaders in the Oklahoma legislature. Senator Roger Thompson is chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee. Elected to the Senate in November of 2014, he represents Senate District 8, which comprises Okmulgee and McIntosh counties and parts of Okfuskee and Muskogee counties. Representative Kevin Wallace is chair of the House Appropriations and Budget Committee. He was elected in 2014 to represent House District 32, which includes Lincoln County and a part of Logan County. And last but certainly not least, Representative Kyle Hilbert is vice chair of the House Appropriations and Budget Committee. Elected to office in 2016, he represents House District 29, which includes most of Creek County and a portion of Tulsa County. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us today. So we've developed a tradition of starting out our legislative breakfast with a slightly lighthearted question, and we're going to uphold that tradition today. Mother's Day is just 1 week away. We don't want to miss an opportunity to say thank you to all the amazing mothers in this world. So my question is, what is one piece of advice your mother gave you that still comes in handy during your work in the legislature? Senator Thompson, we will start with you.
Well, good morning, and great to be with you. I do appreciate the invitation, and a happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers. You know, as we grew up, Mom was always concerned about how we treated other people, and always tried to consider the backgrounds that they're coming from. And I think today, as I work through the legislature, whether that's on policy or whether that's on the financial end, behind every dollar is a person, and we want to make sure that we're still taking care of those people.
Thank you so much. Representative Wallace.
Good morning, Elizabeth. Thank you to the Tulsa Chamber for having us here today. And as Senator Thompson said, happy Mother's Day to the mothers coming up here next weekend. One solid piece of advice my mother always gave me, it was if you didn't have anything kind or good to say, it's best not to say anything at all. And so often at times I find myself holding my tongue quite a bit at the Capitol, but it seems to work out better that way.
Always a very good lesson. Representative Hilbert.
Absolutely. Happy Mother's Day to everyone. And along the same theme, just be kind. That's what my mother always said. And I think I'm very appreciative in Oklahoma City. Obviously, the times that there's disagreements and fights, that's what makes the news. But at the end of the day, Oklahoma City is nothing like Washington, D.C. And I just appreciate the fact that we all see each other as human beings and as people. And so I appreciate that and enjoy the difference there in Oklahoma City.
Yeah, certainly. Well, we will start now with Chairman Wallace on our next question. So it's been an extremely productive session already this year. And before we jump into discussing budget and appropriations, which was what we wanted to focus on, we'd love to take a minute or two and hear from each one of you about some of the other priority bills that you've been working on. So Chairman Wallace.
Thank you. As you mentioned, it has been a very busy session this year. I think a couple things that's led up to that. Of course, last year was a unique session where the Capitol was shut down there for a moment. We worked on a lot of different budgets with the issues coming up. A lot of bills got pushed out, carried over. Some of them were filed and then refiled again this year. I have a long list of bills here that were priorities that really started probably last session that carried over. So I talk about a couple of those real quick. One of them was the remote work bill for commerce. We got that past the governor this year and signed into law, 2860 House bill. Working on another commerce request, which is a Senate Bill 936, and it's still in the process. I think it's probably going to conference and we'll continue to work on that. But two other bills that were very important that have passed and been signed by the governor was House Bill 2873, which was the universal licensing bill. That was a bill that was started on last year and got bogged down in the system, did not get completed. The governor did sign that as well. Another bill that is very important that came as a constituent request, but it had been worked on multiple years before. House Bill 2877 deals with law enforcement transport of mental health or patients that might need mental health. It allows them now to use telemedicine, also cuts down the radius of which they would transport. Is going to prove to be a very useful piece of legislation, very productive for law enforcement and for the constituents needing mental health services. Another bill that we worked on this year that was signed into law was extending the sunset for small business administration loans. It was Senate Bill 2866. And then through the CLO, there was a couple of requests that went into action this year, House Bill 2870 and House Bill 2871, one of them allowing to remove the state-owned property from the cap of the 5% for commercial properties. and the other allowing multiple institutions to be used versus just one on the banking needs. Two other bills that have not made it through the process this year that are very important that I'd like to talk about, and will probably fit into a couple areas this forum. House Bill 2041 and House Bill 2083 are speaker bills, but they deal, and I worked on them a lot, they deal with tax relief. One of them's for individuals with a rebate, and the other one is for corporations with a deduction. As time has proved, and with the current state of the economy, I think it's very important to give back to our citizens, and those two bills are important to me and I'd like to see work continue on them. There's many other bills, but that's kind of a shotgun blast of some of the things that were worked on this session.
No, that's very insightful. Thank you. And I'm sure we'll dive into some of the tax and revenue issues as well with our next question. Vice Chairman Hilbert.
Sure. So I'll talk about a couple bills here. One, worked very closely with the Tulsa Chamber on. This is something Chairman Wallace, Chairman Thompson have talked about a lot over the past year and a half, and that's our Avalor reimbursement program. It's really grown a lot over the last year to the point where the state's liability, when you include the apportionment off the top, is over $160 million. And a quarter of that is going to one county in the state. And that's great that we have industry coming here, but we want to make sure that we set up this program in a way that's good for industry and also good for the state. And so worked on legislation with those stakeholders in Mays County, as well as other stakeholders all across the state to come up with language in Senate Bill 609 that everybody likes in the building, that if you get a product that nobody loves, that it's a good bill. Well, we got a bill that everybody likes. And so very excited about that and hoping to get that across the finish line. Another bill, Senate Bill 838, I was not the principal author on, but I was the first House co-author on to help Representative Nolan with the public safety district issue. I mean, this is a topic that's been 50 plus years at the state capitol, is allowing municipalities the ability to have some other form of revenue besides just sales tax, and specifically for our first responders, law enforcement, firefighters, EMS, and just very important. And I greatly appreciate the folks at Farm Bureau for working with the city of Tulsa and everyone else to come up with language that everybody can live with, and appreciate the governor for signing that into law. Another bill is House Bill 2234, which was the DRIVE Act, and it establishes parity for electric vehicles and ensures that all vehicles on Oklahoma's roads and bridges are contributing to their use. And very excited about that. As everybody on this call, I'm sure, knows, in Oklahoma, we have a 3/4 requirement for any revenue raising measures. And so because of that, it's been a very difficult challenge over the past decade to get this across the finish line. And Senator Taylor and I were the authors on that this year. But Congresswoman Bice, Representative Dustin Roberts, they've been carrying the water on that for the last decade, and just excited to get that across the finish line. And the last bill I'll mention, which is not across the finish line yet, is Senate Bill 229. It's the Red Bud School Funding Act. And what it does is two things. One, the legislature had thrown on our lap a little over a month ago, where the State Board of Education decided that property tax dollars would now go to charter schools, which means that all traditional public schools would lose money, and some of their funding would be shifted to charter schools. And so what this bill does is establishes that charter schools will not receive property tax dollars. Traditional schools will be able to retain those monies, but brick and mortar charter schools will be able to receive some parity, so it increases the funding there. And what we also did is there's a lot of underfunded school districts across the state that are in just value areas. And what this does is it brings all schools in the state up to the average. And so it doesn't just single out brick and mortar charters, but brings all schools across the state. Like in my district, Kellyville, Bristow, Sapulpa, Sand Springs, each are below average funding, and it helps get them up to the average, as well as the brick and mortar charter schools.
Excellent. And Chairman Thompson, same question to you.
Well, thank you very much. And just want to talk about a couple of other issues. Great legislation that both the chair and the vice chair have talked about out of the House. One of the areas that I've been working on for a couple of years is being able to involve our career tech system and our fleet training. And so we can standardize some of that training across the state. And we were able to get that across the line this year. Elizabeth, I want to switch just a little bit from legislation to issues that take a lot of time within in my district. The McGirt cases have taken a lot of time this year, and dealing with our court system and how that's going to be funded. We put the McGirt cases along with the pandemic. A lot of our courts have been shut down. We end up doing a $7.5 million supplemental into our courts. I've been on the phone this morning with some of our judges and talking about how that's impacting our court system and some of the appeals. And then the other issue that we deal a lot with.
Senator Thompson, you might pause for a moment. You were going in and out. Would you mind repeating that statement? You said another issue that we deal with a lot.
Absolutely. Another issue we're dealing with a lot are the marijuana farms that have come on to Ofuskie County and Omogie County, and I'm sure in other districts as well. The people of Oklahoma passed that legislation. It did not go through the legislative process. By mistake question, and how they're coming to the legislature for some regulation. Certainly we need to do that. We had a lawsuit that was filed in Oklahoma County this last week on the seed sale, and article today in the newspapers talks about how it's holding up the seed sale. So the cases that are out here on the farms, a lot of time outside of that.
Thank you, Senator Thompson. And unfortunately, we're still having a little bit of audio trouble just at the back end of that. I apologize for that. We will move to the next question. We can hear you very, very well at the start, if that helps at all. I'll
just speak in shorter sentences then.
That's perfect. That came through loud and clear. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and start with you again, since it did come in loud and clear. The audience would love for you all to give us a peek behind the curtain and give us some insight on this year's budget process. So where are we right now in the appropriations and budget process? And, are there any key differences between the two chambers that are being ironed out right now? Chairman Thompson, do you want to begin?
Thank you very much. I have enjoyed the working relationship with Chairman Wallace this year and the House staff and our Senate staff. And I would say in our budget process, we're probably over 90% in agreement as we move forward. Some of the areas that we're still discussing, as you know, our President Open came out, and the Senate position is that we are not for the reduction of corporate tax. We're still discussing the individual reduction of personal income tax. And then also we talk about some of the educational funding. But, we go back to we've been fairly transparent throughout the entire session. Sometimes I tell people, basically what we know, and they say, no, you know more. There's still more in the smoke-filled room. But I'm telling you, Chairman Wallace and what he's able to do in the House, what he's done in the Senate, keep everybody up to date. But those are some major differences we're going to look at as we begin to wind up our negotiations. And we expect to have some of that done probably by early this week.
Thank you very much, Chairman Thompson. Chairman Wallace?
Thank you. I couldn't really hear Senator Thompson's statements, but hopefully I won't contradict or repeat what he said either way. Negotiations have been very good. It is a process that really starts with the sub-chairs in both chambers, both under the House and Senate Appropriations. Those sub-chairs work across the rotunda. Beginning back in October, when the agencies make their requests, they start doing budget reviews with those agencies. The sub-chairs get to put their input in. Bills work through the process. There's bills out there with impacts that will have direct or a positive or negative impact on the budget. I did hear Senator Thompson say that we're 90%. I agree with that 100%. Typically, as we're getting closer to a budget deal, and we're getting very close, the speaker and the pro tem, and then of course the governor will be in the room on the final decision. Those three principals will end up making some of the very final, and you might call them kind of the bigger decisions. As I mentioned before, the tax relief has not crossed the line yet this year. Film hasn't crossed the line yet this year. There's still a little bit of a discussion about where we're at on education funding between the chambers. So those kind of are the three big things left to just wrap up, but we're getting very close.
Excellent. Representative Hilbert?
I mean, the only thing I'd add is, I mean, we're in the third year of having these two gentlemen as the chairs of the respective chambers, and the fourth year for Chairman Wallace, third year for Chairman Thompson. And I think you see that, and that really helps things because we all know how to work together. And as I said, 90% agreement in the House and Senate, and a finish line is definitely in sight. And when you look at the past four, this year included, and then the three previous years of the budget, we've had quite the roller coaster ride. I mean, in 2018, you know, when the tax increases were passed to fund education, and then moving into 2019, Governor Stitt came in, we had a large surplus, and everything was great. And then 2020, obviously the bottom fell out with the pandemic. Now here we are back in 21 with over $1 billion surplus. I mean, it's been quite the roller coaster ride, but appreciative to have these two men as the chairman who've had the experience of both extremes already.
Well, we absolutely second that statement, Representative Hilbert. And Senator Thompson, I think I might have figured out the sound issue. If you will stop in between each sentence, I think it'll give your microphone a chance to recalibrate. I got a couple of texts from people saying they think that'll help. So the next question actually deals with federal, and I apologize, I know it's frustrating to have those audio issues. The next question deals with federal dollars coming into the state. We know that there's a massive amount of money under the America's Rescue Plan, or ARP, as it's referred to in alphabet soup, under the bill signed into law by President Biden. So do we know how much the state is going to receive, and whether this will factor into the state's budget this year or next year? Chairman Thompson, would you like to begin?
Yes, I'll try to speak slower and stop after each sentence. See if that helps. You know, our total grant funding to Oklahoma under the American Rescue Plan is almost $6.4 billion. That includes the state at 2.1, the local at 1.3, and then there's a breakdown of others under the local. It does have an impact. So we talk about public education. We're talking about $1.49 billion. We talk about higher education, and they're looking at about $430 billion in higher education. And so when we start looking at how we fund this, what we do in education, we want to make sure these are noted as one-time dollars moving forward. Our concern is, Speaker and the Pro Tem had a bill, and we hope the governor will sign it, is that we want to know every dollar that's out there that's a reoccurring dollar that comes in. And so if it's going to come back again next year and cost us money, we want to know that going through the process. And also, it is our position within the Senate that we want to be very much involved in the distribution of dollars, not just in an advisory council to the governor.
Let me ask one moment to clarify those numbers, just to make sure that the audience heard it. What is the total figure that you estimate coming to the state?
The total grant funding is $6,395,493,000.
Thank you, sir. And you said $1.49 billion to common education?
Yes, $1,493,583,000.
Thank you, Chairman. And did you give the higher ed figure?
The higher ed figure is $429,948,000.
Thank you very much. That's extremely helpful. We'll mix up the order a little bit. Vice Chairman Hilbert, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I've had a unique perspective on this, I feel, because the governor, for the initial CARES Act allocation under President Trump over a year ago, the governor set up a legislative advisory council to provide some input on how those dollars were spent. And as Chairman Thompson said, that was more of an advisory role. We didn't have a decision-making role, but I do all the same appreciate the governor putting that together. And then also serve on the Loft Oversight Committee. And one of the things that the Legislative Office of Fiscal Transparency looked into was trying to see, okay, what went well with the CARES Act money, and what do we need to do better? And I think that's really what we're looking at in this second round. The governor's got about $2 billion in more discretionary funds, whereas with CARES Act there was $1 billion. And so with those discretionary dollars, just what did we do well and what can we do better in making those improvements? And one of the improvements, as Senator Thompson said, was having more legislative input on how the dollars are spent. If I could just elaborate a little bit on the dollars to the State Department of Education. In CARES Act 1 was about $165 million to K-12 education. CARES Act 2, President Trump signed in December, was about $650 million to common education, and then the 1.49 American Rescue Plan. And all three of those have the same distribution formula, and that's 90% of those dollars go directly to K through 12 institutions. And what it does is that goes through the Title I formula. And so the Title I formula is really similar to schools, their formula based on free and reduced lunch counts. And so schools with higher poverty areas, so schools in more urban Oklahoma and more impoverished rural Oklahoma received a much higher per student funding through those Title I dollars than some of the suburban schools like Broken Arrow, Deer Creek, Edmond, and schools like that. And so that's just something to keep in mind, is that Title I formula is not the same distribution as our state funding formula. And of the other 10%, 9.5% goes to the State Department of Education that they can use for grant programs and things of that nature. And they've done a lot of that. And one of the things they're trying to do is balance out that funding, so those schools that got less Title I money will get more in the grants. But another piece of this, and something we want to make sure we get done this legislative session, is we have carry forward limits in statute that limit school districts on the amount of state dollars they can carry forward from one year to the next. And one of the things we've done this longer term, but one of the things we want to make sure we get done for this summer as well is waive those carry forward caps so that school districts use the federal funds where applicable and carry forward as many state dollars as possible so that they're as prepared as possible for any potential future downturn.
Very good. Chairman Wallace, anything you would like to add?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Just a couple things. I would express that we're still waiting on the state treasury, U.S. Treasury, guidance for the full use of those funds. A couple other key notes. When you look at the education dollars, if anyone adds up those two numbers and says, well, the number don't add up, there is one other small pot of money that is $41,055,000 that is going to non-public schools, and that will complete the education funding portion. One other thing that will probably be of interest to this group is there is a local relief fund of $1.3 billion going to counties, is basically $776 million going to 9 metro cities, which would be including Tulsa, $300 million, and then all other local governments is $237 million. But absolutely everything that's been discussed, I agree with all those numbers. We're still waiting on final guidance.
Excellent. Thank you all for answering that. Very insightful to hear. So unfortunately, we only have time for one question left. We have about 5 more minutes, I think, is our time frame. So another budget related question. Last year, Governor Stitt's Sooner Care 2.0 proposal passed with support from both chambers. This year, we have Senate Bill 131, which is reminiscent of that plan. But how do you think the fate of that bill and the budget negotiations surrounding funding of Medicaid expansion are going to turn out? And Chairman Thompson, we can start with you. You're unmuted.
Well, thank you very much. When we look at Medicaid expansion, we're looking at a constitutional cost of $164.1 million a year. And as the Appropriations Chair in the Senate, I've tried to stay out of the MCOs and the pay for service discussion, because I've got to pass a budget. And if I come out on one side or the other, they'll think all of my conversations will lead to that. I know that this has been a very divisive subject at the Capitol. The Senate Bill 131 that passed out of the House is now in the Senate for us to consider to move forward. The part of the budget negotiations for me, part of the American Rescue Plan enhanced our FMAP by 5% because we've not expanded Medicaid yet. And so there are several $100 million there. There are some that believe that we ought to use that money to pay for the Medicaid expansion for the first couple of years. My stance stays the same. I don't care how big the pot of money is. You don't use one-time money for an ongoing expense. And so in our budget negotiations, I'm looking for a plan this year to be able to move forward, to be able to meet what the people put in the Constitution for us to pay every year.
Thank you very much, Chairman Thompson. And that came through crisp, clear, beautiful. Thank you. Chairman Wallace.
Thank you. I agree with everything Senator Thompson stated. One other thing to note, as a result of the pandemic, we are receiving another 6.2 enhanced rate that started last year. We thought would end probably at the end of this last calendar year. We'll go through the calendar year of 21 that we're in. Our FMAP rates are literally going to be 80%, which currently our rate for the state, the base rate is about 68.3%. With the expansion, the rate is truly 90%, 10% the state's portion. Senator Thompson mentioned that number, 164.1 million. The funding has to be taken care of. We've had multiple meetings with the Healthcare Authority, mental health, and DHS. On long-term look, I agree we need to prepare as the 5% falls off and the 6.2% falls off. There's been discussions of SHOP. There's been discussions of provider fees as well. At the end of the day, we will fund it. There will be savings within programs and agencies. As you mentioned in Senior Care 2.0, there was savings that comes out of the other programs once we do expand, and that will happen July 1. So that's part of the last piece of the negotiations. I don't think that we're that far apart on having a solution. One other thing that I'd like to point out that's very important is the preservation fund that we come up with about 3 years ago as a concept item for the provider rates. As our FMAP rate has continued to increase over the last few years, we've taken a percentage of that increase and set it aside. When I say that, it's not truly the federal dollars, but when our state dollar purchases more buying power because the ratio increases, we set aside money. So as it decreases in the future, and it's a 3-year rolling average, we can try to keep provider rates steady and flat and stable. With the economy of Oklahoma doing much better than most of the nation at this time, we're looking at the serious fact that probably in 2 years, we're going to have a lower FMAP rate. The lowest we've ever been is 58. As I stated earlier before, we're at 68%, but we do believe that we could see a number of 58 in the future. So as we're talking about funding, savings is very important for us as well. And I think we're all in agreement. We're working on the right number with the agencies to figure out where we'll be in the future. But absolutely, we're going to get it funded and move forward.
Thank you very much. Representative Hilbert?
Yeah, so Senate Bill 131, I believe, was the question, and I voted for it, and I support that measure. I do think it's important, though, for everybody to realize whether Senate Bill 131 passes or it doesn't, we are going to, and just the question is it going to be managed care that the legislature has direct oversight of, and it's ran by the Oklahoma Healthcare Authority, or is it going to be managed care ran by a third-party for-profit institution? And so either way, managed care is happening. And I think with this issue, like many things at the Capitol, either side is not as good as one side says it is, and it's not as bad as the other side says it is. It's somewhere in the middle. But there's been a lot said by both sides about how it's going to change our health outcomes from bottom 10. And I think if you look at health outcomes, there's just as many percentage of the total states that are fee for service versus managed care in the bottom 10 as in the top 10 states of health outcomes. And I mean, at the end of the day, if we want to address health outcomes, it really comes to the predeterminants of health, which is, our poor eating habits, poor exercise, the fact that we smoke, the fact that we have a lot of poverty in the state. I mean, those are the things that drive our health problem in the state of Oklahoma, not necessarily how the health care is managed, but the health itself. And so, but I'm glad we're talking about these issues because these are really big problems and things that we all have to discuss and work through to help make things better tomorrow than they were yesterday in the state.
A very optimistic note to end on. So, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough for lending us your time this morning. And I'd also like to thank you. You all are always willing to speak with us, to speak with our business members, to speak with Tulsa Chamber and Northeastern Oklahoma businesses, and you're not afraid of the difficult conversations, whether we agree or disagree. You'll give us counsel, give us a straight answer, and we appreciate that very much. And we especially wanted to thank you all for some of the bills you mentioned earlier. You've certainly been champions on a lot of one voice priorities this year: the Quality Events Act, public safety districts, Tulsa Remote, the Drive Act, the list goes on and on. So since unfortunately we can't unmute all 200 people on this call, I figured I would try and still play a little bit of applause for you. So let's see if I can. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Mike, I'm tossing it to you.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Senator Thompson, Representative Wallace, and Hilbert and Elizabeth. We sincerely appreciate your partnership, sincerely appreciate your leadership in everything that you gentlemen do with your legislative colleagues. We're now honored to have several of these legislative leaders' colleagues with us today, several members of our Northeast Oklahoma delegation. We will give several of them an opportunity to say a few words. Several have requested an opportunity to pass. I'll call each legislator by name, and they'll have 3 minutes to address our attendees. If we're not able to get every legislator in before the end of our event at 10 o'clock prompt, we will ask you to continue to join us for the virtual networking up until 10:30, at which point you'll have a chance to interface with these other members of the legislature. Leading off will be my personal state representative, Representative Melissa Provenzano. Melissa?
Hello there. How are you? Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here.
A few words. Melissa, you've got about 3 minutes to share your thoughts, observations, some of the things you're working on, some of your key priorities.
Well, thank you. It's been an eventful year at the State House and the State Capitol. One of the things I'm most pleased about is the Student Borrower Bill of Rights, which was signed into law this week and establishes state-level protections from abuse for student loan borrowers here when working with loan servicers. While not loan forgiveness, it gives the individual the backing of state law to pursue damages accrued by failing to provide protections, which can protections from misapplying payments, reporting incorrect information to credit bureaus, placing borrowers in plans that cause their debt to balloon. And as a result, we've seen a lot of Oklahoma student loan borrowers that have been paying for years, but they don't see their balances dwindle. So this is going to help with that. And when we have roughly 50 of our our graduating students from Oklahoma colleges and universities carried debt out of college to the tune on average of about $25,000. And many are putting off buying homes, saving for emergencies, starting families, investing in our local economies. And gone are the days where you can just get a job to work through the summer to pay for college, because costs of college have skyrocketed. And for those who don't pay off their student loans before retirement, garnishment of Social Security benefits is a real thing. And bankruptcy is very rare when it comes to student loans. So we're happy to see this fair use bill take effect.
Thank you, Representative Provenzano. We sincerely appreciate your leadership and you being with us today. Next, we will have Senator Joanna Dawson, as I affectionately refer to as the better part of the Dawson State Senate family. So, Senator Dawson.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Mike, and thank you everyone for having us this morning. It's been a delightful presentation so far. My name is Joanna Dawson. I am a brand new state senator representing District 35 here in Tulsa. I have 3 pieces of legislation that I'd like to talk about this morning. The first is some legislation that our Tulsa coalition really did some defensive work on. It was House Bill 2504, which would have affected negatively our Tulsa Health Department's ability to respond appropriately during public health crises. That bill is not alive anymore this session, and I was just astounded at the level of cooperation and collaboration amongst our Tulsa folks, our Tulsa delegation, working on behalf of our Tulsa citizens and really the region. The next 2 bills are some work that we did some offensive work on. The first was, as Representative Hilbert mentioned earlier, Senate Bill 838, public safety districts, carried by Senator Weaver in the Senate and our Tulsan Representative Nolan in the House. Being brand new, I wasn't someone who, I haven't been involved in the long history of the public safety district fight in the legislature over decades, really. But I got to tell you how inspiring it was to watch the questioning and the debate unfold one late night on the Senate floor over public safety districts. As Representative Hilbert mentioned, the folks at the Farm Bureau did an excellent job with us in our urban areas, working out some acceptable language. And I've got to tell you, our Tulsa delegation on the Senate floor did an incredible job that late night. Senator Dave Rader, Senator John Haste stood up and spoke really inspiringly on behalf of Tulsa that night in favor of public safety districts. I was a co-author as well, but it was just inspiring to watch my Tulsa folks go to bat for Tulsa that night. The next bill and the final one that I'll speak about is Senate Bill 511. It has to do with harm reduction, which in common language is needle exchange. It's a really, it's a topic that a lot of us for so long have danced around. It's hard to talk about. It's certainly outside of the your typical topic that you hear discussed in Senate committee and certainly on the Senate floor. Senator John Michael Montgomery from Lawton carried it in the Senate, and our own Representative Carol Bush from Tulsa carried it in the House. It was an arduous path. I was a co-author as well, along with Representative John Waldron in the House, Senator Carrie Hicks from Oklahoma City, and Representative Daniel Pay from Lawton. But it was a really inspiring journey to watch. Folks from Tulsa, folks from Oklahoma City, folks from Lawton, bicameral and bipartisan effort to push this bill across the line and get it signed by the governor. And ultimately what it's going to do is it's going to keep our first responders and health workers working in safer conditions. And it's going to connect Oklahomans who are hurting to services that they may need. And so thank you so much for having us. It's been a joy. You all are wonderful, and I look forward to the next remarks.
Hey, Senator Dawson, one final question, since this is your first formal event with us and it's virtual. Is there any one thing you could say good about working with your brother in the state Senate?
Well, okay, I'll tell you all the story. So sorry, I got stories, but anyway, JJ and I live together in Oklahoma City. We have an apartment. It's like being 10 years old again, but with no mom. We are a mess. When we moved in, we forgot toilet paper and we forgot shower curtain, and we just really needed our mama. But anyway, we're making it okay. We honestly don't talk shop very much when we leave the Senate floor, don't talk legislation very much. We have 2 incredibly different districts, and so we are often not a voting block. There's often a green Dawson and a red Dawson, or a red Dawson and then a green Dawson on the board. And anyway, we just do it all in love and harmony. And then I try to take that experience that we have as family, blood family, and apply that to the rest of my Senate family. Hey, we can disagree on stuff, but at the end of the day, we're here to work together, get things done, and enjoy one another when we're not working, and come back the next day and work together again on the hard stuff.
Thank you, Senator Dawson. That was good. Appreciate you being with us today. Next up is Senator Joe Newhouse. Senator Newhouse. Hopefully, Senator Newhouse will be popping on this screen in just a moment. We may be having some technical difficulties. Let's go next to my personal state senator, Senator Dave Rader. Senator Rader? He may have some observations about last night's NFL draft as well.
Joined up. Good morning, Mike. Good to see you. Thanks for doing this morning. Lots of things going on in the legislature, of course. We're trying to move more things in a positive direction than a negative direction. This time of year, sometimes some debates become long. But again, as Senator Dawson is saying, trying to work together and do things as best for the state of Oklahoma. Some of the things that I've been working on is we had some constituents from Tulsa that wanted us to see if there would be some help to change home health care, and that if private home health care could have the same abilities as Medicaid home health care with some of the responsibilities. This would help with the upcoming ever increasing number of people being needed to have care at home. So we passed Senate Bill 42 and the governor signed it. So that's going to be a help for home health care professionals. Senate Bill 57 and 58 is the continuing tweaking of the opioid bill that we passed, 3 years ago, Mike? This one here is to help those that are in hospice or receiving cancer treatment to have the pain medication that they need. We're trying to make sure that the people that are in need of pain care receive their medication without it just being the problem that we've had a few years ago. We also, in that bill, allowed for the patient to be able to access their records. Mike, I think you would be as surprised as I was that the patient was not allowed to have their records up until we passed this law. So the patient will now be able to have their records. With Representative Hilbert on there, I was proud to co-author with him the electrical vehicle fee that will go on. We help pay for our highways, and then ran Senate Bill 600 that would distinguish the tier levels of taxation for recharging stations. And so we have that much more clear now on how that will work. And all this is set in anticipation for more and more electrical vehicles coming in. But one of the things I've been working on, Mike, as vice chair of the redistricting district, I want to show you here. This is Senate Bill 1066 right there. All right. So whoever came up with pictures worth 1,000 words, here's the written word of how Oklahoma is going to be redistricted with their Senate redistricting. 599 pages. And here's the picture book that shows it. So the picture book, yes, takes away about 1,000 words per picture. So we've been working on that. Some of the highlights that came out of the redistricting, that 54 counties remain whole. What we have now is 51 counties remain whole, so we've increased that by 3 counties. One of the main stats that I thought was very, very telling of the work that was done is that the current map that we have has 10,000 cuts and edges on each district, and we've reduced that to 9,226. So that's about 16 cuts and edges reduction per district. So we're trying to make the districts more whole, more compact. To do that, we had our redistricting committee meeting last Wednesday, and it was passed 12-0 in committee. So that is very, very encouraging. I know everybody is anxious to see how their districts will change, and now we have a map on that. We'll probably have to come back in special session in October once the August numbers of the census are released, and then we'll do the congressional redistricting at that time. So that's what we've been doing, Mike. Oh, and right there above your left shoulder, you're right. We need to mention that gold helmet there. We have a new profit center in Tulsa, and Zaven Collins, congratulations to him. What a fine young man. We could do nothing but wish him the best. And all at once, the city of Tulsa, hopefully, most of Oklahoma is already Arizona Cardinal fans because of Kyler, but now everybody can jump in there with Zaven going there as well. Congratulations, that fine young man.
Well said, Senator. Thank you. Thank you so very much. And thank you for your leadership and good luck with all the reapportionment efforts. Best of luck there. Next up, one of the outstanding, we'll call him the pride of Monroe, Louisiana, Senator John Haste.
Thank you, Mike, and good morning, everyone. It's good to be with you. One of the things I wanted to touch on that doesn't always get mentioned that much, that the one of the jobs of the Senate is to advise and consent related to executive nominations that the governor does. This week, we actually approved 19 different executive nominations that the governor had. 2 of those fall into what we call Tier 1. One was a cabinet secretary of public safety. And then secondly, we had a state regent that was confirmed by the Senate, and then had 17 other nominations that we confirmed. And matter of fact, last night, the governor's office reached out to me about carrying 3 new executive noms, which I will be carrying. So the senator that resides in the district of the individual carries that nomination, has to agree to carry it, and then in turn, it goes before the appropriate committee, and if it passes there, then it goes on to the full Senate to do the advising consent. And that's definitely one of the important jobs that we have at the state Senate. Secondly, I will mention a couple of bills. One that I'm very proud that we got across the finish line this year, started it last year, but this was a request from Sheriff Rigliotto. I was the Senate author. Representative Bush was the House author. This was Senate Bill 87. This is related to what's called the mental health diversion bill. This allows police officers, law enforcement officers, to be able to, when they're dealing in a situation of mental health or even low level drug offense, to be able to make the decision to take someone to the proper facilities, mental health type facilities or substance abuse facilities, versus arresting that individual. So it's getting them in the system, but getting it to the right part of the system. And this has been signed by the governor, so very happy about that. Another important bill that was passed, it was also it was a request bill from Northeast Oklahoma from St. John's. This was about telehealth for physical therapy. As someone that a year ago was dealing with shoulder surgery and the importance of physical therapy, this hit home with me. And with the pandemic, we saw, and then also into our rural areas, the challenges sometimes to be able to get physical therapy, to be able to get to a location to do it. Being able to do this by telehealth will help in those type of situations. So again, 2 important bills there. One last thing I'll mention, something that has been on the radar for at least 10 years, is on and off ramp at the Broken Arrow Armory, that off the turnpike. That's something that's very needed. We're continuing with that. We're moving forward. I will be able to tell you that the first part of July, probably right around the 6th, there will be an announcement as to the location that's been selected. And so that we'll be able to get the public comment on it so that people are able to see the impact it will have. And if everything goes forward with that, then we'll be able to move on with that, to be able to get that on and off ramp, which would happen probably in 23, 24. And with that, Mike, I believe I'm out of time, so I'll turn it back to you.
Senator, thank you so very much, John. Appreciate your leadership, and thanks for everything you're doing. Next up is Representative Jeff Boatman. Representative Boatman.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me. And I just want to echo Senator Rader. That golden hurricane helmet looks awful nice up there. We see a lot of orange and a lot of red in this state, but we do have a team that's beaten both those teams. And there's a coach on this call that can probably tell you a little bit more about that if you're interested. I have a couple 3 bills. This has been a weird session because so many of the bills are repeats from last year when we didn't get to complete session. So I was happy to get a couple done this year that I had been working on with some guardianship attorneys here in Tulsa. One that established a Canis waiver for emergency guardianship so that we can keep our kiddos safe when we need to get them into an emergency guardianship, and one that helps with folks with these Medicaid set-aside trust, especially with stimulus money coming and things that have been happening. These have been a big benefit. Also was able to get across House Bill 1568. We called it Maria's Law. I was honored to get to work with Senator Haste on that one this year. It was a fantastic partner getting that done. It now establishes that we're going to teach mental health education to our kids in K through 12 at an age appropriate level, and help them have conversations about mental health and understand it so that it's not so stigmatized, and in the hope that when students have issues and are struggling, that it's normalized and they know how to reach out. The bill also allows local nonprofits and community partners to partner with the school and just to engage those districts with resources so that everything doesn't come back. And then the last one I'll talk about was great to get to work with Senator Thompson on 1121, which was the changes to the Quality Events Act. That was a one voice initiative that extended that act and then allows us to use an economic impact study instead of trying to round up thousands and thousands and thousands of receipts, and just makes everybody's life a little bit easier. Again, thank you so much for hosting the event. It's glad to be back in front of everybody again and get to give an update. Thank you very much.
Representative Bolton, thank you so very much for being with us today. We sincerely appreciate you and appreciate your support, as well as all your colleagues. Unfortunately, we're nearing the end of our event, and I want to thank each of you so very much, especially our legislators, for being with us today. Fortunately, we've had several other legislators join us today. Senators Joe Newhouse, Senators Nathan Dahm, and Senator J.J. Dawson, as well as Representatives Melody Blancett, Monroe Nichols, and John Waldron. Unfortunately, we do not have time for them to talk today. However, we'll hear from them at our next upcoming legislative briefing breakfast event in the coming month. Again, I want to say a special thank you to our legislative leaders, Senators Thompson, Representatives Wallace and Hilbert, for sharing your insights with us today. Also, want to once again thank today's presenting sponsors, the George Kaiser Family Foundation, One Gas, the Osteopathic Founders Foundation, and TTCU Federal Credit Union for their generous support of our programming. If you join late or want to share this event with a friend or a colleague, a recording will be posted on the Chamber's YouTube account, so feel free to share that. Our final legislative briefing breakfast this year will be on Friday, June the 4th at 9 a.m. You can register at tulsachamber.com/events for that and other upcoming chamber events. You'll also soon receive a survey to provide us feedback on today's events. As we consider using Remo for other virtual events, do let us know what your thoughts are about today's experience and maybe even how it could be improved. Certainly, we're all looking forward to seeing you in person at events very soon, hopefully beginning this summer. But again, please do not hesitate to reach out to our chamber staff or to me personally if we can assist you in any form or fashion or assist your business in any form or fashion. It's been an amazing past year and a quarter as we've all worked together collectively through this pandemic. And we've been so much stronger together and so much stronger helping one another. Again, I want to say a special thank you to our Tulsa Regional Chamber volunteer leadership, our board of directors, our staff who continue to do an amazing job every day on behalf of the business community and on behalf of our citizens in Northeast Oklahoma, and specifically on behalf of our member companies. So thank you all so much. Have a great day. Enjoy our virtual next networking opportunity for the next 30 minutes. Thank you and have a wonderful, beautiful weekend. Thanks, guys.